Hey, everybody. It's been a few days because, as many of you know from listening to my radio show, my voice was basically kidnapped and abused by strangers. But it's back, and I'm relatively okay to go. One of the big things that's happened this week is that DeMeco Ryans spoke at the NFL's owners' meetings. And I got to tell you, I disagree with a lot of people, including my co host, Sean Pendergast, who believe that DeMeco tipped his hand in terms of who they really, really love as quarterback. I think it is Bryce Young, but a lot of people thought that his comments at the owners' meetings were 100% affirmation and confirmation that the Texans want Bryce Young come hell or high water. I'm not so certain about that, but I want to go over a couple of things that Demico said at the owners' meetings, and then also something that Ryan Day said that a listener sent me that I'm willing to see the other side on this and maybe inject a little bit of doubt into any kind of CJ Stroud love by the Texans. But this was Demico and asked, what's the most important thing you look for in a quarterback?
For a quarterback, I think the most important attribute I look for is that how's his leadership style, right? How are those other 10 guys looking? Can they look at you in the huddle and know that, man, we can count on this guy to make a play? We believe in you. And then you have to look across the ball, and it's those other 11 guys, those defensive guys. Can they look to that guy? Can they count on him? Right? Is that quarterback a guy who can galvanize a locker room and rally the troops and get guys to believe in him? That's the trait. And it's easier said than done because only so few guys can do that. Right? And it's special guys, and that's a special position where you can find a guy that his teammates can rally behind, teammates believe in him. That's when you know you have a guy. Is there a quality?
Okay, so there's that. Look, okay, I don't know if that doesn't describe half the quarterbacks in college football, the successful ones. It tends to be, especially in college, you can identify guys that are good leaders. You know, Tim Tebow was a hell of a leader. Ultimately, he just wasn't all that good of an NFL quarterback, but guys believed in him. He galvanized guys. I think CJ Stroud is that guy as well. All of the attributes that Demico will talk about here in terms of if you've got Bryce Young in your head, I think it's tempting to think like, oh, he's obviously talking about Bryce Young, when in fact it could very easily be CJ Stroud. I want to share something from Ryan Day, and it's a relatively short clip from Big Ten Media Days this year, in which he's talking about CJ Stroud. It starts off really, really good, and then I've got a little bit of doubt in terms of necessarily how great a leader Ryan Day himself thinks CJ Stroud is. Let's see.
About CJ for him to make that comment on who he is as a person, because when you look at the two losses, that I don't think he played that bad in those two games. I don't think CJ Stroud was the problem, but for him to say that and for him to take on those losses says a lot about who he is as a leader. That's the way he is, though. He is very driven. He wants it really bad. He's very competitive, but he's a very good leader. I think in the offseason, he's recognized that I don't think he ever felt like he could do it on his own, but I think he maybe recognizes has a different perspective that, it takes everybody. And that comes with maturity. And he's done an excellent job of that. But to say he accomplished nothing last year, that's not accurate. But that's his approach, and I think that's what makes him great.
Okay, so I'm going to do something here, which I hate when people do, except I'll take a positive and turn it into a negative. The one part that caught my ear there, because I fully expected to take that video and turn it into an argument that, hey, look, Ryan Day says nice things about CJ Stroud also in his leadership. But the fact that he had to mention that maybe there was a realization in the offseason that it's about the whole team and you can't do it on your own. That maybe he's not as natural a leader as Bryce Young. I want these guys coming out of the womb fully developed as leaders. I want them to be freakishly mature if I'm going to hand them a satchel of $40 million guaranteed and have them lead my football team. So I will concede that I think in terms of when you listen to the full tone of the way people talk about Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud, I think Bryce Young tips the leadership scales a little bit more. But we'll listen to. There's another question in here. Let's see. The next one is there a quality or such that you've seen in someone who can do that as a rookie? So asking asking Demico about whether there's a quarterback that he's seen that can do that as a rookie, probably thinking about Bryce Young as they're asking this question.
Or such that you've seen in someone who can do that as a rookie?
It's every player is different. Some rookies can do it better than others. Some it takes time to develop, right? It's a unique position, and it's not just a cookie cutter, one size fits all, right? There's many different ways to get that done, and I've seen many different styles work.
All right, so I mean, with Brock Purdy, let me fix this. With Brock Purdy, look, I think he a leader as a rookie. I don't think that most quarterbacks, even the really good ones, necessarily need to be leaders as rookies. They need to learn how to play quarterback. And it almost, the performance always precedes the leadership. A guy's leadership abilities don't mean squat if he's a horrible quarterback. There have been great guys, so many great guys out there that are awesome backup quarterbacks with incredible leadership abilities. A lot of times that's like their attitudes and personalities are what keep them in the league as long as they have. You know, I think Doug Peterson sounds like he was a hell of a guy as a player, probably a great natural leadership abilities, but he wasn't a good quarterback. The quarterback playing well first and establishing himself comes before being a leader. So that's where you got to nail it right. Bryce Young might be the best leader in the world if he's not playing football well. And you know, realistically, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, neither of them might be playing great football their rookie season. They don't have to worry about the leadership part as much. We'll take a little sojourn here just because I haven't edited this into Jimmy Ward land. And we've talked about Jimmy Ward on this podcast, YouTube stream before. So this is also related somewhat to the leadership part. But is there a balancing act with a new team? You want to bring in some new guys who know you and know your system because you don't want to bring too many. How did Jimmy Ward fit into that?
You want to bring some of your guys who know you and know your system, but you don't want to bring too many. So how did Jimmy Ward fit into that?
Yeah, it is a balancing act. You know, initially you want to bring guys in who know exactly how I want things done, how our culture will be set. You want to bring those guys in, but also know it doesn't just work that way, right? So to be able to get a guy like Jimmy Ward is very, very vital for our defense. You know, Jimmy is a guy, I feel he plays safety in our scheme. He's played nickel, and Jimmy is a veteran guy who's played a lot of football. So with the younger guys that we have a real very young group, young nucleus of players who are talented. I feel like Jimmy can come in and just help those guys aside from the football aspect, but also just off the field, just how to be a true pro. That's what Jimmy provides and brings to those guys, and excited to get, you know, a guy who can do it in a leadership role. He can provide off the field and on the field. Jimmy is still playing football at a high level. So to add a safety who can make some dynamic plays for us was very vital.
Okay, so now as far as Jimmy Ward goes and how it relates to either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, Jimmy Ward's an interesting one because I think that, you know, if any of you watched my video I did with Jimmy Ward, he's not like the classic yes sir, no sir, everybody listen to coach type of guy. Like he's a free thinker in a good way. Like he's gonna speak his mind. And the fact that he has a relationship with Demico and that he went through a little bit of trial and tribulation with the coaches in San Francisco last year over whether or not to play nickel cornerback. And we'll listen to an answer about that just in a second. I think is it's telling both in the confidence and security of Demico, but also that Jimmy Ward is a guy that first and foremost is a football player, like, and is going to come and bring it every single Sunday. And guys like that, it's so important to have guys like that if you are going to have a young quarterback, because there will be difficulty. There will be rough stretches. There will be guys that want to jump ship, perhaps. And Jimmy Ward has seen it and been through it with the 49ers, with a team that's had some very high highs, but then followed immediately by a down season after their Super Bowl, and then back to the highs again. Like San Francisco's been a story of highs and lows in a lot of ways, and Jimmy Ward's been there through that. I think I've heard some people mention, like, it feels a little too much like Ed Reed, maybe, bringing a veteran safety. Ed Reed was on his last gasp as a productive football player when he got to Houston, and it was a bad scheme fit also. Like he and Wade Phillips just didn't see eye to eye. So this is obviously the opposite of that, except for the one fact that Jimmy Ward didn't want to play nickel cornerback at first last year, at least reportedly didn't want to. So Demico was asked about this. In case you can't hear the audio, he says, does Jimmy Ward want to play safety over nickel? And then there's another, and then after that, we'll play a question about Bryce Young's size that Demico answers.
Of course, everyone knows Jimmy wants to play safety, but in talking to Jimmy last year, I always told him, like,
hold on a second.
When you
just so enraptured with my own face that I forgot to show you guys Demico, who looks by far the fittest NFL coach right now. And that includes in a field that includes guys who are pretty damn fit, because these guys aren't the old fat guys from back in our day. These guys are young and fit looking, but Demico, I believe, amongst the top quartile of the top quartile of NFL coaches right now.
Play the nickel position and you can play the safety position. It just opens up a lot more avenues for you, and that's what it's done for Jimmy. And Jimmy he's been very fun to work with, because he jumped into that nickel role and he thrived in the role, made probably more plays than he's made playing safety. So Jimmy he can play anywhere, but I'm going to play him at safety.
Okay, so that was like Jimmy Ward likes playing safety, likes having that opportunity to come up, and he will hit people. Like, he and Jalen Petrie are going to be fun next to each other. Jalen Petrie has flaws in his game that he will tell you about and that he wants to attack. And a guy like Jimmy Ward being next to him is going to be really, really good. I think also when it comes to using both those guys up in the box or as blitzers, and the ability to use them interchangeably, to have one guy be the deep guy one play and then Jimmy, the other guy be the deep guy the next play, that's going to go a long way. And having that leadership, as we talked about, helps the leadership of a Bryce Young, a CJ Stroud. And then this next one is about Bryce Young. In case he can't hear the question, he asks, what have you seen from Bryce Young, particularly his size?
For Bryce, and I know it's a lot going on to talk about his size, right? The guy's done it at the highest level in college football, and hasn't seemed to be a problem. So, I don't see it as an issue, because you watch the tape and you put on the tape and you see the kid play, and you see how smart he is. You see the anticipation. You see the accuracy. You see how this guy is calm in critical moments. So when you see those things, size isn't one of the factors that pop up on tape. It's like, oh man, it's a problem. So, again, you just look at the track record, see what he's done in the SEC, highest level college football. He's been successful, and I think he'll be successful in the NFL as well.
And honestly, like, everything there that he says about Bryce Young, I think you could also say about CJ Stroud, just maybe not as much so, particularly the calm part. And I don't want to take away anything from what CJ Stroud did in college, because obviously he was a brilliant quarterback, and I think he has potential. When it comes to, removing size from it, if you just watch the way that Bryce Young operates in the backfield, there is a calmness there that it reminds you a lot of Pat Mahomes, really, in that there's kind of a very casual yet extremely effective way of executing fakes, of going through reads without looking like you're hurrying through it, and just kind of letting the read come to him. There's a lot of, with young quarterbacks, a lot of times they look sped up. They look like they're kind of trying to hurry their way through things, or frantically, like when you're trying to find your keys or something and you got to get out the door. Quarterbacks look like that sometimes. I think there's a nature to CJ Stroud where, even though he's performing very well, it looks a little bit more forced and hurried up than it does with Bryce Young. So the calm part especially, I think, applies to Bryce Young, but I don't think it's anything right there that he couldn't have said about CJ Stroud, other than that nobody's got any questions about CJ Stroud's size. And I think that's the one big thing. If I'm sitting in DeMeco Ryans or Nick Casario's shoes right now, even if I really like Bryce Young, I think it's impossible to not have questions or doubts about his size. Even if you believe, like I don't know, like, Copernicus back when he figured out that the Earth was round. There's probably some part of him was like, all right, I gotta need to see one more. Give me one more of these shadow experiments or something to let me know for absolute certain. Because I got a whole lot of people telling me that the Earth is flat as a pancake. I don't know if pancakes existed back then. So I think likewise, there's reservation. Even if you've done the calculations and you figured out in today's modern NFL, there's actually no more risk at weighing 201 pounds than there is at weighing 225. There's still a little doubt in your mind because it hasn't been done before effectively. Kyler Murray is as short as Bryce Young, not as skinny, but also hasn't played all that well and he's been injured. Like there's reasons for doubt that they might think, all right, look, we like Bryce Young, but CJ Stroud checks off more of the conventional boxes. Maybe we don't think that he's as supreme a talent in some respects, but we still like him a lot. And I think that's why there was no desperation to trade up to number 1 overall, perhaps. Next question, and this obviously relates to having a rookie quarterback out there, is how important is it to fortify the offensive line and defensive line?
Right. The O-line, D-line, as that's talked about earlier, that's the important piece, right, to building a football team. You have to build it from inside out, and to add interior defensive linemen, to add, really good offensive linemen to our team, that's going to be vital to us moving forward and being successful. That's where it all starts. If we can't play well up front, we're not going to be a good football team. So we want to continue to add up front as much as we can on the defensive and offensive side, add as much depth as we can, because, you lose those guys at times. So you have to have enough depth. You have to be able to rotate guys on the defensive side, and you have to have solid guys in the offensive line, that you can count on, and that, we can run the ball behind those guys, and they can also protect.
I don't think you would have seen this.
Look, I don't. I think that the running the ball part there is obviously not just lip service there. Everything they've done in the offseason so far, from taking an awesome run blocking right guard in a trade and taking free agent wide receivers who are also good blockers. Everything they've done in adding a running back to the backfield speaks to establishing the run and doing everything you can. Like that's the best thing you can do for a rookie quarterback. The center position obviously is the point of huge concern right now. The nice thing about the center position right now is that is a position where you typically get in the second round and later. I would love to have a more established veteran, and there's still room and time to get one of those guys if perhaps the draft doesn't work out as well, or maybe even in training camp, if they think they have a promising rookie, but who doesn't, develop quickly enough, they could go out and trade for somebody if the other veterans aren't playing well enough. So I'm not super concerned about that. A lot of you guys know I'm a little bit nervous about having both a center and a rookie or a center and a quarterback who are rookies. And then on defense, he talked about rotating defensive linemen. That's why at that number 12 spot, I know wide receiver is the most popular thing that a lot of people want. I think I'm never going to complain about taking a pass rusher at the number 12 spot ever in any draft at any time until the rules change to where pass rushers aren't as important as they used to be. Give me a pass rusher any day of the week, all day, every day. If that's who the best player available is, it's almost, you can't have enough of them on your team, too many of them on your team. And if you've got too many and you're afraid about paying them at some point, then trade the one who's got the most annoying personality out of there. Next question is a quick one about Lamar Jackson, and you can actually hear this question if I remember correctly.
Lamar just tweeted just now about his stance with the team. It looks like he's requested a trade here. Is that a player that strikes interest? I mean, how do you go about?
If you can't hear that, he's talking about Lamar Jackson having tweeted out that he had requested a trade back in early March before the Ravens put the non-exclusive tag on him.
Looking at exploring veteran quarterbacks.
We look at all options for our team. Yeah. Right? We look at all options for our team, so that falls into that category as well.
Demico,
Okay, so I don't know, like, what do you think the conversations between Demico and Caserio and Bobby Slowick have been about Lamar Jackson? That's a question that would be really interesting to know. And there's a little bit of symmetry there just because Greg Roman was the offensive coordinator for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. He's finally fired. Well, I shouldn't say finally fired. I like Greg Roman. It's just it was time to move on. But he also first made his mark as Colin Kaepernick's offensive coordinator in San Francisco, or maybe started as quarterbacks coach, moved to offensive coordinator, however it was there, and did really good work with Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo. So he's got this reputation as a guy that kind of gets the most out of guys who aren't great passers, but who can run, and you hit teams with a QB running game. But the question is exactly how much did Greg Roman, or how good is Greg Roman at developing guys into passers? So I wonder if Bobby Slowick looks at Lamar Jackson and thinks, you know what, man, there's untapped upside there. There's things that we could be doing with him that Greg Roman isn't. Or does he look at it and say, man, Greg Roman is maxed out what Lamar Jackson could do? I think it's kind of a moot point right now because the Texans have this draft pick. They have this slot. There's no, for other teams, I'll listen to arguments about why they should be going after Lamar Jackson or don't, whatever. I think for teams that have a high draft slot right now and have a crack at one of the top two quarterbacks and getting him on a rookie contract, it just doesn't make any sense at all. So luckily, we get to stay out of that debate for the most part. We're not one of these poor souls that has to entertain people getting angry about Lamar Jackson all day long, every day. So the next question, in case you can't hear it, is going to be, if you were to look last year, you talk about intangibles for quarterbacks. If you look at last year in quarterback Brock Purdy, can you tell me from the time he first came in minicamp, what did you see in him and how did that develop during the year? And then I think after that, we end up getting hit with a deluge of questions from San Francisco reporters. So I'll take some of your questions after that. Oh, there's one more rookie quarterback. So we got another couple questions relevant to the Texans quarterback situation.
If you were to look last year, you talk about intangibles for quarterbacks. If you look at last year in Brock Purdy, can you tell me from the time he first came in minicamp, what did you see in him and how did that develop during the year? I know there were a lot of guys on your team who saw that sort of development as a person, not just as a player.
Right. From the player, all right, you just
Okay, so the part there too, if you couldn't hear it at the end, he said the development as a person as well as a player, which is interesting because he did have a lot on his shoulders, that kid.
see him coming into the spring, you really don't know who he is. It's Mr. Irrelevant, last pick, and guy you aren't expecting much, right? And you continue to see this guy just make some throws in practice. You're like, whoa. And it's eye-opening. Then we continue to go through training camp. We go through the season. And with him being our scout team quarterback, he's fitting some balls in, and he's making some very difficult throws, making some nice plays, moving throughout the pocket, scrambling, still creating on the move. And when you see our defenders, Fred Warner, he's like, oh man, I'm telling you, this Brock Purdy, he's legit. He has that kind of it factor that I was talking about earlier when the defenders, they see it and they notice it and they want to get behind the guy. And that's what Brock had, right? He had that it factor where he had that playmaking ability to where it galvanized the defense. They were behind him and they knew he had something special to him. And everybody believed in him because you can see the type of plays that he was making.
That's fun. That just takes me back to sometimes as a defensive player, you start to get your pets on the offensive side of the ball on the scout team because they're guys that you've recognized as being good. People would say that about Arian Foster when he was a rookie, that you just kind of identify these guys. And sometimes with me, it would be offensive linemen that I was going against. Drew Hodgson, who comes on my shows here and there. I always felt like Drew Hodgson was getting screwed over because he was a center and he worked his ass off in practice. And he was a pain in the ass to me. I had a hard time going against him. So you kind of get these pets where you're like, look, coach, you start talking to the coaches. What the hell's wrong with you guys? Why aren't you playing this guy? And I could totally see that with, Fred Warner, defensive backs saying that about Brock Purdy. I think that's another reason that I more so than most people, like the idea of rookies sitting for a while when it makes sense, when maybe they're not quite ready. And if you can, the best case ever was in Kansas City because Alex Smith was playing fine enough football. Well, you had rookie Pat Mahomes, who was very raw and needed to learn some things. But the best thing that happens to a rookie quarterback running scout team is that you get to experiment with a safety net. Like you get to figure out exactly how tight NFL windows are. Like how far can you push the envelope without doing it in front of tens of thousands of people or millions of people on television. And I think that goes a long way. So Brock Purdy got to spend 2/3 of the season, figuring out, all right, these are NFL passing windows. This is where I have to put the ball when I'm throwing on a 15-yard out. And I gotta just thread it just right to where it's not an overthrow, but it's not going to get picked off for a pick six. All those things, they're really hard to learn in week 1 of the regular season in the NFL because you're not really. I mean, in a lot of ways, quarterbacks they're definitely more challenged, like physically and schematically running scout team than they are playing in the fourth quarter of an NFL preseason game. Fourth quarter of an NFL preseason game, you're trying to throw to receivers who don't know what route they're running against defensive backs who have a very good chance of not even making the team versus scout team every day. You're going up against Jimmy Wards and guys like that. So that's but at the same time, if you're drafting a guy number 1 overall, it's okay. This is the guy that's supposed to, or number 2 overall. This is a guy that's supposed to be able to handle that kind of pressure and scrutiny and figuring it out on the fly. So the next question, I'll go ahead and let it play, and if you can't hear it, then I'll narrate.
Sometimes people don't look at that much in football is the number of how much you played in college.
Yeah.
And I look at a guy like Bryce Young or CJ Stroud.
Right.
They've played a lot in college, so they know that there's going to be some failure and everything. Is that important for you to gauge? Do you value experience a lot at the college level?
I do value experience. I think that experience is the best teacher, Peter, and that's what you saw from Brock last year. Brock played, he started for 4 years there at Iowa State, and he had experience. So when he got in the game, it wasn't too big for him. And that's how I tell guys that, the game doesn't change as much, right? Yeah, guys get a little better around you, but the game doesn't change much. And Brock had that confidence about him because he had been through a lot of situations. He's played a lot of ball, right? And Brock, not only that, but his preparation, what he did when he wasn't playing, right? After practice, he was with our quarterback coach, Coach Kubiak, right? And he was working with him, going through the entire script. So he can put the work in. He has the experience, but also what is he doing behind the scenes when everyone else is in the locker room getting ready to go? He's still out there on the field working. So it's about having a special work ethic at that position as well that sets you apart from everyone else.
In that part there too, the question was about whether that extra leadership, that extra experience as a starter in college matters. I totally 100% believe that it does. It's just that it doesn't make any sense financially anymore for guys to stay in. It used to be guys, scouts would really prefer to draft a guy who had been a 4-year starter in college. That's like drafting an NBA player who's been a 4-year starter in college anymore. It's not going to happen. Not at the very top of the draft. Because there is something, it's not just the X's and O's. I think a lot of it is just getting the reps of actually being the guy in charge of everything, having that pressure on you. The amount of pressure, like the pressure that you feel as an individual is not any different in the NFL than what you felt in high school, in my opinion. And I've talked to guys about this. I talked to Owen Daniels about this because Owen Daniels was on a really good high school football team. And like when you go to compete for the state championship in high school, that's your whole universe, man. You got no perspective on anything. Like that high school in that little town, that's your whole universe. And you're too young to really also put things in perspective. And you haven't necessarily developed all those skills at coping with pressure. And I look back to the way I was before games in high school, and I used to be sick to my stomach. I just felt nauseous and agitated. It just changed completely. So I think just having those reps does make a difference. I think CJ Stroud and Bryce Young have now both been in enough high pressure situations. I think the big difference is that I think Bryce Young has been more consistent and stable from game to game and throughout his career than CJ Stroud has been. But I think with both of those guys, that's an advantage you do have. They've played at the highest level. Like with Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Watson, I never worried about his stress level in big games because he's already played in a national championship game. That's just as big in your mind when you're, if not bigger, when you're in college, then it ends up being in the Super Bowl in the NFL. So let me get a few of these questions. And I'm sorry, everybody, I won't be able to get to everybody. Somebody asked if this show is regularly scheduled. It most 100% certainly is not right now. I'm working on that. I keep experimenting with different things. I go to bed so early. The thing is, on YouTube, most people around 7 p.m. is when they're ready to fire up the old YouTubers. But that doesn't work with my schedule all the time because I'm like starting to prep for the next day's show and go to bed. There's a big argument about Anthony Richardson and for and against right now. I'll just grab one from Jacques Onu, who asked the original question in this discussion. I've been kind of monitoring it out the side of my eye. I think the rare athleticism allows for a high floor if Anthony Richardson is healthy. The kid has a solid foundation as a QB to develop from and displayed significant progression last season. Yeah. I think with Anthony Richardson, and I know a lot of other people have echoed what I'm about to say on here, is high floor, yes, but high floor also means, you're arguing that he has a high floor. I would argue that the athleticism doesn't provide a high floor. I think the athleticism provides a high ceiling. I think he has been more accurate in some respects than people realize. It's just that his errant throws are so errant. So he's like Nuke LaLoosh in the baseball movie there. What the hell's the blanking? It's too early in the evening for me to be blanking on the Kevin Costner movie. So I think that there's the high athleticism is this. Like, ask yourself, who is the quarterback in the NFL who has been blisteringly successful long-term without being able to throw at all? Like who is it? Like, who's the guy who's a bad passer but has had a long and illustrious career and was worth a number 2 overall pick? Like, I don't think Anthony Richardson so far he's not been nearly as good as Lamar Jackson was as a passer. I mean, Malik Willis so far hasn't looked so hot, So I just don't like. At some point, we got to be able to trust you as a passer. And right now, I think people are very on the fence as to, exactly like how often can you take a guy like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis and make them accurate throwers? It happens with guys like Josh Allen, but it's the exception, not the rule, And I think Josh Allen probably did a service to guys like Anthony Richardson because people will point at Josh Allen as an example, but I don't feel as good about him as I do Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. I get it. But I just can't go there. Let's see. And I'm going to pick these at random because I'm cooking tonight, everybody. So I gotta start preparing dinner. Let's see. I think he identifies either BY or CJ being targeted. If the Panthers draft Young, then it's Stroud and vice versa. Yeah, I think it's as simple as that. I think that they have a favorite, but I think they might have them graded as however their grading system is a 6.9 and a 6.8 or a 7.2 and a 7.1. And ultimately it's splitting hairs because these guys, if they've got any kind of humility at all, they know that they're wrong a lot. It's really, really hard to predict who's going to be a good NFL quarterback. Look at the guys who have been drafted in the top 5 at quarterback over the past decade. It's freaking hard. Yeah, Bull Durham is the movie. I can't believe I messed that up. Thank you. Jacques Onu said that I pronounced his name perfectly. Well, that's a rarity. How confident are you that the Panthers will take Stroud number 1? I'm not 100% confident. I think that, Daniel Jeremiah is a guy I respect a lot. And he's talked about this when the 49ers traded up in the draft a couple years ago to draft ultimately Trey Lance. The story was, oh, yeah, they love Mac Jones. They traded up to take Mac Jones. They're taking Mac Jones. And Jeremiah fought it because he just said it didn't make any sense to him. Like, Trey Lance made way more sense. Trey Lance played in a similar scheme in college. He didn't see Mac Jones as good a prospect as Trey Lance to go that high. Like, all these reasons, he felt like it shouldn't be Mac Jones, but people kept telling him it's Mac Jones, it's Mac Jones, it's Mac Jones. So finally the groupthink beat it into his head and he succumbed to it. And I think in his last mock draft, he said, fine, they're taking Mac Jones. And he was wrong. So he's talked about it on his podcast right now. It's a really good podcast, Move the Sticks with Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah. He said, I can't do it because I think Bryce Young is the best quarterback. So everybody's telling me that it's CJ Stroud, but I can't do it because I think Bryce Young is the best quarterback. So I'm not confident. Until Daniel Jeremiah is confident, I'm not going to be confident. And I think Daniel Jeremiah hears things, knows things. He's very careful. He's not like he's not an Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport that needs to publicize or break stories. But I think he firmly believes that Bryce Young is the better prospect. The big thing is going to be the Carolina Panthers perhaps might think that Bryce Young is the better quarterback, but they feel that CJ Stroud is better suited to survive in the NFL just because of size or because height is a factor. You do have to modify your game if you're a shorter quarterback. The one statistic that I throw out and I don't really believe is that because Frank Reich has only had quarterbacks who are 6'2" or taller, that's his type of quarterback. Like there have been like 10 starting quarterbacks in the last decade who are shorter than 6'2". If that even. Like it's very rare. It's more rare than people think. So I don't think that it means that he definitely hates guys who are shorter than 6'2". And also, as Sean Pendergast, my co-host, pointed out, it's not like he's been in control of who all those quarterbacks are either. He may have had success with those guys, but I don't think necessarily that it means he has a type. Like Belichick has always been intrigued with guys like Tim Tebow or guys they could run or were atypical and weren't necessarily the statuesque tall guy that people assumed he would like because he had such success with because he had such success. Sorry, I got distracted by three different things. Because he had such success with Tom Brady. Let's see. How big of an upgrade have the Texans made with free agency pre-draft? How much improvement do you think we've made? It's a good question. I think, honestly, that's where I know people are underwhelmed with what the Texans have done. I'm honestly very okay with exactly what their strategy is right now. And maybe that's me being a homer, but I don't believe in like big time free agency acquisitions as a rule, unless there's something where you're putting the cherry on top of a team that you think is championship caliber. The vast majority of free agency deals don't work out. I say vast majority, about 2/3 of free agency deals don't work out. Like if it's a 4-year deal, most guys are gone by year 3. If it's a 5-year deal, most guys are gone by year 3 actually also. So I'm not as swayed and I don't need to necessarily see like extreme movement, but I'll pull up the tracker here just so you guys can go along with me. And we'll go through just were these upgrades at these positions and starting at Case Keenum for backup quarterback. I don't know if that's, there we go. All right. Who's that fella? Oh, Sean Payton, former almost Texans coach, Sean Payton. Let's see, AFC South. All right. Case Keenum as backup quarterback, I suppose you would say yes. Let me get rid of that. Okay. Mike Boone at running back. That's here, there, anywhere. Devin Singletary. All right. Let's say Devin Singletary alongside Dameon Pierce. Is he an upgrade over Rex Burkhead? I'll let you guys debate that on the side if there needs to be a debate. Noah Brown, not projected to be a starter, so I won't necessarily go into that. Robert Woods. That's a good question. Was Robert Woods an upgrade over Brandon Cooks? I know he'll probably be present for every game, which is an upgrade in terms of dependability. I think that Brandon Cooks brings more juice as a receiver right now. Robert Woods brings more juice as a receiver / blocker. And I know people don't like hearing that going all the way back to the Kevin Walter days, but in this offense, I think it makes a big difference. So let's call that, I'll concede that Brandon Cooks overall was a better receiver. I don't think Woods brings extra juice to it or not. So you definitely didn't get better there. Tight end Andrew Beck, adds depth to it, more competitiveness. Tight end Dalton Schultz, definite improvement there. I think that one criticism I could make of Schultz as the guy would be that I think he was maybe a little bit more of a product of the system in Dallas. So that all that tells me is that he's not worth a $50 million contract. Obviously, nobody out there thought he was worth a $50 million contract, but that was also in a year where there's 3 really, really, really good tight ends in the draft. So I think a lot of teams felt like, well, why am I going to dole out a huge contract to Dalton Schultz when I've got a good crack at one of these guys in the first round? So I think Dalton Schultz kind of got caught in the crunch a little bit, which is to the Texans' benefit. But I think his ability to be a good safety blanket for Dak Prescott, it shouldn't be underestimated as a skill. Like that takes being smart in the scramble drill. That takes reading coverage as well. That takes understanding the offense. So I'll say an upgrade there. Laramie Tunsil re-signed, so no movement there. Shaq Mason, right guard, that's an improvement. Scott Quesenberry re-signs at center. That's obviously we need work there. Maybe Quesenberry will thrive in this. Winovich, as of right now, just a guy with upside. Sheldon Rankins. I think Sheldon Rankins, as opposed to Roy Lopez or Kurt Heinisch, and I like those guys. I think they've got a role in the NFL at some point. Sheldon Rankins is just a flat-out better football player. So I think you put him next to Malik Collins, and all of a sudden you've got viable interior pass rush. Malik Collins, underrated as a pass rusher. So, yeah, I would say an upgrade there. Corey Littleton and Denzel Perryman as a combo to come in and compete with Christian Kirksey. Compete's a tricky word in the modern NFL training camp because you don't actually get that many reps. You used to be able to compete by guys getting reps, preseason game. I don't know how much of that there is anymore. So it gets tougher for these guys to make that decision. But I do think Denzel Perryman might bring a little bit more juice overall than Christian Kirksey. But you can also, there's room for both Denzel Perryman and Christian Kirksey. Tavir Thomas was a re-sign. Jimmy Ward is a safety / slot corner. I think that improves the team too. So they got better. They're not long-term acquisitions that are going to, likely most of them won't be around here, but that's why you have 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year, 2nd, 3rd, 4th-round picks galore, and oodles and oodles of cap space starting next year in 2024, 2025. I think this is the first year of really trying to establish and finding that young talent. Well, you have older guys on the team who are here for a year or two. Like Jerry Hughes is 35 years old. He was one of the more effective pass rushers in the league last year. I don't need Jerry Hughes to be here when he's 38. Hopefully, one of the guys they draft this year or next year is the starting defensive end. But that's where I am. So I don't think that DeMeco Ryans, to conclude all of this, necessarily. Where do we do this? All right. I don't think DeMeco Ryans necessarily tipped his hand. I think he said a lot of nice things about about Bryce Young that also could have been nice compliments. If he'd been asked about CJ Stroud, that he would have given to CJ Stroud. They always have to remember this when you're parsing out the coach's comments or players' comments. If somebody says something really nice about a player, first ask, wait, was he asked specifically about that player? Oh, okay. Remember when people would ask Deshaun, hey, Deshaun, what do you feel about this coach? And Deshaun would say, he seems like a good coach. Oh my gosh, that's who Deshaun wants. Deshaun wants that guy to be a coach. Go get that guy to be the coach. It's okay. Ask anybody, some question about your favorite kid, one of your children. Okay, you got 3 kids. You got Jimmy, Susie, and John. And I ask you a question about Jimmy. Hey, what do you like about Jimmy? And then you say something nice about Jimmy. How would you feel if I started tweeting out that obviously Jimmy's your favorite? You probably wouldn't like it too much. Maybe you would. Maybe Jimmy is your favorite. Those other kids are yours. They don't get it. Probably not even yours. I'll have some kind of a steady schedule here at some point in the future. I make no concrete promises. Good day, everybody.